Hello, everyone. So, out of curiosity, I looked up what the average attention span was at the turn of the century and what the average attention span is now. And obviously, since the turn of the century, we had the advent of the smartphone, and we know what that has done to our mentalities. At the turn of the century, the average attention span was 12 seconds. Obviously, not a lot of time to focus on anything. Most likely, most people are not going to be able to focus on a single song, let alone an album, if they have that mindset. Now, 20 years later, 21 years later, it is 8 seconds, which doesn't seem like a lot, but that's a third of what we were capable of at the turn of the century. And what we have seen, obviously, in how we digest music right now, is that people need to have things in comfortable, bite-sized little chunks before they move on to the next thing because they get bored. That isn't anything else on syndrome that we have now, fueled by our own egos and the need to be constantly having that stimulus, has really eroded away our chances of actually getting to the meat of what an album should represent, let alone a song. At this point, maybe even a riff. We just don't have the capacity to mentally digest things. And what that has led to is, as you've seen in my other videos, the dawn of the YouTube guitarist who is going to have that small bit of time to showcase his or her talents, most likely through technique alone, because people are not out to have something substantial come their way. They're not looking for depth. They're just looking for something to catch their eye for the 12, now 8 seconds that they're going to devote before they move on to the next thing. And I was going through my YouTube feed, and I saw that Ibanez Guitars has given an endorsement to Ichika Nito. And if you follow modern guitar in any way, or if it unfortunately follows you, you probably have seen him. He right now has gotten very famous by putting out less than a minute long guitar videos that usually have like a meme title, like when your mom doesn't pack your school lunch or some bullshit like that. And the video is always very dexterous, very notey. They're almost all kind of the same, but they showcase a lot of technical skill. Well, technical is probably the wrong word. You're not going to hear fluctuations within the riff that showcase that there is much more beyond technique. It's more technique based than technical. It's not super weird time signatures. It's not having different riffs cause the adjacent ones to have more meaning in balance and in contrast. You're not going to see that in these videos, but you are going to see someone that has harnessed a great amount of skill with the guitar on display for less than a minute, which is a nice diversion from our day. But it should only be processed as such. It's not the type of media that should be given any kind of credence as having depth, as having any kind of source of a player's identity. You can't really get that across in these small little bite-sized chunks. And I looked him up just to see where he came from. And he initially started by having full songs in his videos. That didn't get over with the crowd, and he only caught fire when he decided to have the meme song title and have very small segments. That's a great way to get someone's attention nowadays when people can only listen to something for a very short amount of time and then move on to the next thing. But Ibanez has endorsed this guy and given him a ridiculous looking guitar, and now that has fueled the fire for people that don't really care about music but like technique to continue to try to write these bite-sized, flashy things so that you can get a social media presence and maybe somewhere down the line a guitar endorsement as well. And the sensational aspect of the flashy player was always there for signature guitars. The Joe Satriani S series, the Steve Vai universe guitar. Those were granted to people that had technique on display more so than arrangement skills. And I totally get it. If you're going to be drawn to guitar, there has to be a benchmark for technique that people will strive toward until they can realize that their internal voice should be what dictates their creative process. So this is nothing new, but the fact that Ibanez is going to give an endorsement to someone based on a YouTube following that is rooted in very, very brief videos instead of someone that is putting themselves on display in song form, in album form, is pretty crazy to me. So it makes me think, how can the average metalhead who has, lost control of the plot in terms of how to steer an audience, how to show an audience what we stand for, how can we get them back? How can we possibly mirror this kind of approach while not sacrificing who we are? And in essence, that's kind of what I'm doing with this channel. I used to write for multiple publications. I used to do album reviews, stuff like that. And I knew that based on what I was seeing in how people process the internet, you really kind of have to attach a face with the name, get people to empathize with you by having that sense of connection. That's the best way to get someone to follow your content. And I unfortunately fall into the same rut as everyone else, where I start to think, am I putting too much of this out there to satiate my ego, or am I trying to actually make a stand here and attempt to somehow turn the tide? And when you have a social media presence, that ego feeding is always going to be there. I would be foolish to deny that element is not going to be present in what I'm doing in some way with my videos. However, I knew that by taking this route, there was going to be more people listening to what I had to say, because I'm putting myself out there in a vulnerable way by having my face and communicating with you guys. So how can we do that and take the same kind of template that the average YouTube guitarist is doing and still have our kind of content that is pithy and has depth? I think that a possible way would be to take the album approach, because we can't get rid of the album approach. We can't get rid of the song approach. You can't have one of those like reality defining moments in 15 seconds, under a minute. You can't have that sense of clarity that you get when all of the riffs come together and the arrangement takes you somewhere. You can't get that in such a brief amount of time, but you can break it up in a way where you can establish something in a video, maybe wait a week, establish the next thing. So people don't have the time to process an album anymore. No one's going to sit down, open up a booklet, read along with the lyrics, and get lost in an album. But what we can do is take an album's worth of material, present a song a week, get people to actually have that hook baited, and give them just that amount of time that they're possibly going to have to get into your material before they move on to the next one. That'll leave them actually looking forward to the next song, and hopefully by the end of it, if you have this kind of statement in mind, you'll be able to take them along on a journey that won't exhaust their attention spans, but they'll be able to put it together at the end and maybe then listen to it as a whole and then realize that there is an artistic statement to be had there. It's one way around it. I don't know if it could work. Who knows? I am still an advocate of the album. Every time I write a record, I think of it as a full album. And if you listen to anything that I've done, you'll see that the spaces between songs are going to be deliberate or not there at all, because it's meant to be written as a single piece of music. It's meant to be digested as a single piece of music, where each song represents something that leads to the greater whole. I try to be very cognizant of a fully encompassed vision when I make a record. And I don't think a lot of that is going to be happening nowadays, but we could still get that across, but with breaks in between where people could potentially hear a song, wait a bit, hear the next song, and then the greater whole emerges as it's digested. I don't know. It's something that we can do. And maybe if I have another project come along where I make the record, I can release song after song in a way where it will get people to pay attention in those bite-sized segments in song form. I'm never going to put a riff at a time. I'm never going to put a song or a minute of a song at a time. That's just not enough time to establish something unless, I'm going to go the grind route, which I'm not. It's something that we can potentially do. And I don't want to sacrifice what we're trying to do in metal. I don't want to gloss over the necessary things that you have to do to establish an actually concrete musical format. And I do think that if you think about the concept of adapt or die, things are obviously different now. Things are different in the way where the metal that we know and love is essentially dead, and in order to resurrect it or continue to carry that flame in any way, we do have to adapt a little bit. And I'm more of an advocate of the idea of adapt and die. I think that if you change the format of something that initially had a list of bases that make it what it is, you're essentially betraying the initial idea, and it's impossible to not do that. I think that there is room for the evolution of a specific sound of every genre. There is a big enough box within what metal represents, what black metal, what death metal, what all the real metal genres stand for, where you do have enough room for artistic interpretation. But if you go too far outside the box, introduce elements that don't belong spiritually to what those genres represent, you are adapting and dying. But I'm looking for ways to adapt while keeping what represents who we are present. And this is a potential idea that maybe we could bring forth. I don't know. Maybe I'll try it with the next thing I write. But clearly, something has to change. We can go and continue to put out album after album that we toil over and give you 41 minutes of material and hope that you're going to take something out of it that you're going to need to devote your attention to. But for the most part, it's going to be lost on all audiences, let alone the extremely niche ones that we have. So maybe it is time for a change. Maybe because our attention spans are so short now, maybe it is foolish of us to even ask a modern audience to devote that much time. But who knows? I mean, that element of the full album is always going to be there for me. That element of wanting to present a cohesive idea over the course of multiple songs that will develop the greater whole is always going to be there for me. But there might be other ways to go about giving it to the audience. We'll see. So those are my thoughts on that. We have to change something. We have to change something to stay alive. See if we can get there.